All right, so we're in coding from scratch. This is the first lecture in your program for software development or full stack web development. In coding from scratch, we go over 3 base core technologies in software development. That's HTML, CSS, and JavaScript. So you have 2 weeks right now for this coding from scratch course you're in. This is day 2 of that 2-week course. Your first lecture, there will be 2 lectures. The first lecture is today. The next one is Tuesday, and that will cover the second half. Today we're going to be talking about HTML and CSS. Before we dive into talking about HTML and CSS, let's talk about the 3 technologies and kind of the role they play in a website or an application. So HTML stands for Hypertext Markup Language, and it's just that. It's a markup language. It allows you to define the structure of your application or of your website, so the layout of things. CSS stands for Cascading Style Sheets, and like the name implies, it's a style sheet. It allows you to add style or basically the look or the beauty to your application. It allows you to make things look good. And then JavaScript is a programming language that will allow you to add functionality to your website or your application. So the 3 of them together can be thought of as a body. The HTML is like the skeleton. It is the structure of the body. The CSS is like the skin. It makes the body look nice, bearable to look at. And the JavaScript is like muscle. It actually makes the body do things. So today we're going to focus on HTML and CSS, so the structure and the look of the application. Next week we'll be focusing on JavaScript and add some functionality to the application. So I'm going to start by creating a new project directory here. You can do this from the command line, or you can do this by right-clicking and creating a new folder. I'm going to go ahead and do it right here and create a new directory. I'm going to call this one just 5 and cd into that. Now I'm going to go ahead and open this up in Atom. You can use Atom, you can use VS Code, whatever editor you're using, that's fine. So I'm going to open this up here, drag it over so everyone can see it. And you can see I've just got an empty folder here. That's all I've done so far, created an empty folder. Like I said, you can create that from your terminal or command line, or you can right-click and create a new folder. I would highly suggest that throughout this course, you create a folder called school or projects, or create a folder to organize all your projects into. Anytime you then start a new project, you can go in and create a new subfolder, subdirectory, with the name of the project you're starting. That way you can keep your code all organized and know exactly where it is. Otherwise, you're going to end up with things on your root directory. You'll end up with things on your desktop, with things in your documents. And then when you're looking for a project you're working on, or to reference something you already completed, you won't know where it's at. So I would highly recommend organizing your projects from the very beginning. So to get started, I'm going to go ahead and create a new file in here. I'm going to call this index.html. So this is going to be an HTML file. Now, the term index.html is a very common convention that a lot of servers use to denote it's basically the home page of any website. So index is your home page. It is the base, the home page. So in creating an HTML page, I have a shortcut here on in Atom. I just HTML enter, and that will give me a few things here. The very top is your document type. This is used, HTML is a subset of XML, and this declares what type of document it is. It's an HTML. Then you will see these things are a little more important than this first line here. An HTML page is wrapped inside of an HTML tag. You can notice that each tag is denoted by this opening and closing diamond brackets, or less than and greater than symbols, and then HTML. So here's the opening tag, and then here's the closing tag. And you can see the closing tag ends with it has a slash right there after that less than symbol. Everything inside of that is inside of that. It's like scoping. It's blocking them together. So this is the open, this is the close, and this is all inside of it. Then I have a header or a head tag, and you can see this starts here and it ends here, and you can see that the meta and the title are inside of that. Notice how everything is indented in order to make it easier to look at. If I didn't have that indentation, let's go ahead and get rid of some of this stuff. That makes it really difficult to look at and know what is where. So I have my indentation there so that I can see, you know, just by looking at it where everything is. So inside the head is where we can put things like some metadata, the title of our page. I'm going to go ahead and call this CFS Week 1 Lecture. Save that. And then our body is probably one of the most important tags. This is where you put everything that's going to show up on the page. So right now, if I open this in my browser, now if you're using Atom, you can follow the instructions to install an open in browser tool. But let's do it a different way. I'm going to actually go in here and open it up. So I'm going to go to my where I've got all these projects stored, which is in projects. Where's that? Projects, school, CFS lectures, right here. So there's the HTML file I created. So if I double click on that, it will open that up. And notice how up here in the corner, it says CFS Week 1 Lecture. That is the title that I gave my index right here. So that's where that shows up. Now the body is where I can put anything that will show up in here. So if I go ahead and say hello world, just in plain text, save that, come back, refresh my page, you can see hello world shows up here. So this is where we're going to start building the structure of our HTML. So I'm going to go ahead and talk about a few different elements in HTML. So the first element we're going to talk about is a paragraph. So a paragraph is created with a P tag, stands for paragraph. You've got your opening and your closing tags right there. So if I say hello, this is a paragraph. Anything I put in between those, that's a paragraph. I come here, refresh, there's my paragraph. Notice it moved it down a little bit. The paragraph has some styling that puts some indentation between the top and there. Now if I create another paragraph, this is another paragraph. You can see that it automatically puts a new line in between the two paragraphs. So this is something known as, there's two different types of elements we're going to be dealing with. There's block elements and there's inline elements. This is a block element. It takes up the entire width of, let's see if it will show that. See how it goes all the way across when I inspect it? It takes up the entire width. And so anytime you put a new block element there, it will show up below the one before. The other type is called inline. Inline elements will show up side by side. All right, so there's my paragraphs. Next thing we're going to talk about is head tags or headers. So H1, this is H1. And this goes all the way to H6, and I'll show you them in between. I'm not going to do each one. This is H3. And H6. So you can see you can use those for headers, basically anytime you want a header on something. 1 is the largest, 6 is the smallest. All right. After that, let's go ahead and take a look at inputs. So an input will look like this. Type, we'll call this text. and self-closing tag. Now you can have the self-closing tag, or you can not have that, and it's fine. So here's a text input. I can actually put some text into there. Notice with the input one, I have something else inside the tag, and it doesn't take a closing tag. It's just an opening tag. It's known as a self-closing tag. I could put that right there. It doesn't need a closing tag. But inside of it, I've got something else here, and this is an attribute. An attribute is something we can add onto an element, and it comes in a key value pair. So the key is type, the value is text. We put the value inside of quotation marks, and then the equal sign assigns that value to this key, and that altogether is a attribute. So basically we're saying this is an input of type text. There are other inputs. Input type equals, let's say, password, which works very similar to that, except for it hides what you type in. And there's radio buttons, checkboxes, and buttons. So input type equals button. Let's see if that one works real quick. Actually, I usually use button for that, so that might not work. Give me a minute. Yeah, no, that's not what I want. Type button value equals hello. There we go. So there I created a button. The way that I normally create buttons, though, is just with the button tag. And then I can say another button between that and close my button tag. So there's my other button. That's what I usually use for buttons, but those are two different options. All right. And so the next thing that's very important in HTML are links, hyperlinks. This allows you to go from one page to another. And you guys have seen them, the underlined blue before, like from the 80s and the 90s. If you click on one that's underlined blue, it takes you to another page. They're a little better styled now. They don't always look like that, but I'll show you. We'll get into styling and how to make them look nice. For now, just know that a link is denoted by the A tag, and then you add href. This is the URL you want to link to. For example, if I say www.google.com, and then I can say this is Google, and I can close my A tag there. So I save there, refresh it. There's my link right there. If I click on it, it looked for it on my file system. So that's not what I want it to do. So let's go ahead and say HTTP. Let's try that. Refresh. Google. There's google.com. So that you can link to other sites. Notice how this is the text that shows up right here between the opening and closing tag, and this href is actually the URL you go to. So if I refresh that, you see this is the text that shows up. Same thing for the button, same thing for the paragraph and the headers. It's what's behind, it's what's between the opening and closing tags that shows up. Now, what if I want to have multiple pages? I can go ahead and create, let's create an about page, about.html. And I'm going to go ahead and add my HTML skeleton there. And inside of this, I'm going to add a header, header 1, and I'm going to say about. If I can spell, about. Page 1, save that. So if I want to go to my about page, I can create a link, and I can put an href here and go to about.html. And I can go ahead and say this is about page and close my A tag there. Refresh that. Here's my about page. If I click on that, it takes me to that page. So perfect. Now I was telling you guys about block and inline. These are block. These are all inline. You can tell because they're all on the same line. It puts them right after the next one. So that's the difference between block and inline. Now what if I didn't want these right after each one? I wanted the actual new line between each, I can go ahead and I can add a break line, which is just BR. And you might see these written like this, BR. There's multiple ways. I tend to do this one more. So let's add those to those two right there. Refresh. You can see it added a new line between each one. Something else we have here for HTML is a table. This is a very important one. So I can go ahead and create a table here. And now there are other elements that help you break it out between the table header and the table body. You can also see those ignored a lot. So the thing with table that you need to realize is it's divided by rows. So if I create a TR, that's a table row. Inside that row, you can have data or a header. So if I go TH, that stands for table header, and I can say name. Let's go ahead and TH, and let's put number. So this will be one row. If I save this and come here and refresh, you can see name and number show up. It's one row. Now if I add another row there, TR, and I'm going to add some table data now. So the headers, just like any table in Excel or anything, that's your headers. Data is what's going to be there. So I'm going to say Sam, and I'm going to put another piece of data there. His number is 480-555-5555. Right? So if I save this and refresh, you can see that data there. Now if I wanted to add another row, I add another row just like this and add some more data. There we go. Table data. 623-555-5555. There's my data right there. So that's a table. Now it's not styled right now, so it's not really that pretty and you can't really see much there, but that's a table. If you style it out, you could add borders around it and make it look more like something you'd see in Excel or something you see that's a lot better. Yeah, that covers a large percentage of the very important elements you'll see. There are more elements. As you see them, you can, a really good place to look, if it's not covered in the curriculum, which a lot of it is covered in the curriculum, you could go to W3 Schools and take a look at the HTML. This is a good resource for learning new HTML elements. You can see, we got our headers, paragraph, break line. What I do if I see something that I've never seen before, let's talk about images real quick, and then I'll show you. Say I see an image tag and I don't know what that is. A lot of times I'll go W3 HTML image. This will come up, click on that, and I'll read the documentation on it and how it works. So an image is done by, let's go ahead and say image, and then you say source equals, and this is where you link to the image. This can be a relative path or an absolute path. Just like our links here can be a relative or absolute. So what relative and absolute mean, this one right here, this is relative. This goes to the about.html page relative to my index.html. This is an absolute path. Absolute is like an address. The way I like to think of them is an absolute path is like an address to a house. If I give you 1234 East Easy Street, it doesn't matter where you are in the world. If I give you the full address, East Easy Street, Phoenix, Arizona, now no matter where you're at in the world, that points to one space. It's an absolute path. A relative path is like saying 2 doors down. Wherever you're at in the world, 2 doors down means something different. It points to something different. So this is a relative path here, this about.html. It's pointing to the about.html relative to where I'm at in index.html. This http google.com is an absolute path pointing to an absolute URL. So in my source for my image, I can put a relative path or an absolute path. Since I don't have any images in my project, I'm not going to use a relative path. I'm going to use an absolute path. So I'll go ahead and find an image I want to use. Let's say, let's find an image of a cat. We'll go ahead and take this one. This cat's on a computer, so that works. We'll go ahead and open it in a new tab. Grab this URL right here. This is my absolute path. absolute URL. So let's paste that in there. And go ahead and close that. Save. Back here, refresh. There's my image right there. So that is a handful of different elements you'll see. Like I said, if you run into elements that you don't know what they are, you can look them up and figure out, or you can always ask questions. You can message any of your mentors or instructors, and we can help you out with that. Let's talk about styling now. We've got all these elements, and it looks like kind of an eyesore right there, and we don't want that. We want it to look a little better. So I'm going to go ahead and get rid of all this and start with something else that's going to look a little better. And we'll learn a few new elements here as well. So I'm going to go ahead and create a header. Now, a header is something we didn't talk about, so now's a good time to talk about it. A header is just a container. It doesn't do anything at all, really. It just helps organize your code. This is my header. Save that, come back. This is my header. As you can see, it is a block display element. It goes all the way across. When I hover over that, you can see that. So inside my header, I am going to create a nav bar. Nav, again, is just another container. Doesn't really do anything. It just helps you know that that's where your navigation is going to go. So in my navigation, I'm going to put a bunch of links, because that's going to be what navigates from one page to the next. So I'm going to go ahead and create this. I'm going to link that to my home page, which is my index.html. And we'll go ahead and call that home. And close that all together. And then I'm going to go ahead and link this one to my about.html. I'm just going to have 2 pages here. So I come back, there's my nav bar, home and about. Now I want to be able to go back and forth, so I'm going to go ahead and copy this header. I'm going to put this in my about page and put that right above that header there. So now when I come here, refresh, I can go to my about page and go back to my home page, back and forth. They're linked together. All right. Now, I don't really like the way that this looks. I don't like the, let me make sure I pull the right one up there. I don't like this 1990s look here. I want to make this look a little better. So this is where I can start adding some style to it, or some CSS rules. And CSS works in a set of rules, just like these attributes on HTML where it's a key value pair. Our CSS rules are also key value pairs. So there's a rule for something to style, whether that's the border or the background color or the font weight, the font style, anything like that. Those are things you can style, and that would be the key, and then you assign a value to it. So for example, if I went to my body and I said style equals, so this is my attribute where I'm going to add some CSS styling to it. I'm going to say background dash color equals, or not equals, colon. I'm going to set it equal to gray. Save that. Come back here and refresh. Now I've got my background color of gray. Notice here, it's still a key value pair. Background color is set to gray. I'm not using an equal sign for this. CSS uses a colon. And then you end each rule with a semicolon. So now let's go to my nav bar, and let's say I want, go ahead and move this over here real quick. That's easier. There we go. Where did my thing go? Participants, good. So I'm going to go ahead and add some style to this link right here. So style equals, let's, excuse me. Let's go ahead and add some color to it. The color will be sky blue. Now color, that's going to change the text. So you can see that by, let me open that back up. If I refresh this, you can see the text has changed to that sky blue color. Now you can use hexadecimal colors there as well. We'll get to that in a minute. Let's see. Do nav bars have to be on the top? No, nav bars do not have to be on the top. You can put them wherever you want to. Just some common design patterns to consider, or common design that's happening today is they have them at the top, they have them along the side a lot of times, like going down, but you can put it however you want. Good question. So I've changed the style, the color to blue. Let's go ahead. I'm going to say text declaration and set that equal to none. And what that's going to do is allow me to get rid of that underline because I don't want the underline there. So now I'm going to go ahead and add some padding. Set that to 15 pixels. Notice how I'm switching back and forth so you can see what each one does. Now that added some padding there, so it's not close. That is actually a really good way to handle writing your CSS. Make sure you're checking to see every time you make a change what's going on, because you want to see what's actually happening with each change you make. Otherwise, you make a bunch of changes and you might have an adverse effect that you don't like. And if that happens, you have to undo a bunch. It's easier to see until you get really familiar with it, everything that's going on one at a time. So let's see here. All right, I'm going to go ahead and add float left to this. So float left. Save that. Tab back. Now float left. I moved it around a little bit. You can see kind of getting a more square feeling right there. So now I'm going to go ahead and style the nav bar itself. So let's go ahead and add some style here. Actually, before I do that, I'm going to go ahead and copy this whole style and paste it in this one. So I've got them both styled the same. If I come back, there you go. Now I'm going to go ahead in my nav, add some style, and let's go ahead and set the background color to black. Same thing as I said with HTML. You can find a lot of these different CSS rules online. W3 has a list of them that helps out a lot. But if you're looking for something to do, Googling is your #1. Google is your best friend in anything. Throughout this whole course, throughout your whole life and career as a software developer, you will constantly be Googling things all the time. So if you don't know how to do something, Google's always the first place to look. So we got that black. Let's see what that does for us. Didn't do anything for now. We got to add a few more things here. Let's add overflow. Not like that. Overflow hidden. There we go. So now I got a nav bar that's actually looking like something a little nicer. So I sent you. All right. Now I want to add one more thing to this. Actually, no. We'll do that in a minute. Before I get there, I want to take a look at what we have here. Now this works. Everything's styled. Looks nicer than it did before, so that's a plus. However, I've got this same code written right here twice. Now that might not seem like a big deal at first, but what if I add a few more links for that nav bar? Now I've got it, let's say 8 times. But what if I want to change something? I want to change the color. Now I have to change that 8 times. And it starts to become a maintenance nightmare. So this is what's known as inline CSS. And there are 3 types of CSS that we'll talk about. And each one is a step up and it gets better. So inline CSS is something that people do not want. You don't want to write inline CSS. It's considered bad practice. So the next thing we have is called internal CSS. So it's not inline, but it's still inside of our HTML file. So to do that, I can come in my head right here, and I can add a style tag right here. And I can put my styles inside of this style tag. So right here, I want to target all of my links, and there are multiple ways you can target elements, and we'll cover them. But I want to target my link by the link tag. So in order to do that, I can just say A, and then I put some curly brackets. Now every rule I put inside of here will be applied to every link in my page. So I can go ahead and just copy that out of there, add it here, and you put each rule on a new line. That's just convention. Makes it look nicer. You can kind of see what it's supposed to be. So I can go ahead and get rid of my style here now, and get rid of my style here. Save that, come back, F5, it's still the same. So now anytime I want to change anything here, I change it in one place and it applies to both of them. So it's a lot easier to maintain this. So that is awesome. So let's go ahead and add that change to the rest of this. I've got one for the nav. And we'll go ahead and grab these. Get rid of my style there. You notice it also cleans up my HTML a little more, so I can see what the structure is without having to look at the CSS in the way of it. So we'll paste that, save, and then our body. Here we go. Background color gray, get rid of this. Go over, it all looks the same, we're good. All right. Now, the problem with grabbing this by just the link is that any other link I have anywhere on the page, like if I have a link down at the bottom, and that's just a link to something, that same style is now applied to it. Well, what if I don't want all my links to look like that? What if that's just for my nav bar? Well, you can be a little more specific with what you want it to be. So I could say header space nav space link. So what this is saying is that every link inside of the nav bar, inside of the header, will have that. So that's pretty specific. So that will roll out other links. So then I can style them the way I want to. So that's the first selector we can use to style our elements. A selector is something that selects an element to apply these CSS rules to it. That is grabbing it by the element. There are two others that we can use. And I'll go ahead and let's create, let's see, what should we create down here? Let's go ahead and add a, let's add some inputs here. Let's say username, actually no, I'm gonna add a form. So we'll say form ID equals sign-in form. Now ID is the next of the selectors. We can select something by ID. ID is used for something kind of specific. It's usually a unique identifier. Now multiple things can have the same ID, that's fine, but usually ID is for something more specific. And that's the selector we'll be talking about a little more in a second. So let me close the form. And let's go ahead and add username, add an input. And this will be class equals custom input. And this will be type equals text. Close that. I'm going to add a break line here. And then we're going to go ahead and say password. And that will be an input of class equals custom input. And type equals password. Now notice how I put an ID on one thing and I put a class on two things. So classes are used more for multiple things that could share the same thing, share the same style, and an ID can be used for, it can be used for as many as you want. You put the ID on multiple things like I said, but it's usually not used for that. So let's go ahead and write a selector for the ID. So we can't just say sign-in form, because this is the syntax to grab something by the element tag. IDs are denoted by having a pound symbol before it. So this selector is saying anything with the ID of sign-in form will have these rules right here. So I'm going to go ahead and add some rules. Let's say border style is solid. Border color is sky blue. Border radius. Actually, let's stop at this and see what happens. Come back over to this. Refresh. There we go. You can see there's a border around it that is sky blue right now. So let's go ahead and add some more style to that. We're going to say border radius is 15 pixels. I'll show you what that does. Notice how the corners right now, I'm going to get rid of this. The corners are very pointed. If I refresh, now they're curved. So to give us more of that curved look. So I'm adding a radius on the border. Then we'll go ahead and we'll say the width is 20%. That made it shorter, so now it's not going across the whole thing. And we'll go ahead and add a margin, and I'm going to say auto. That's going to automatically add a margin on either side that is equal. So boom, now we've got it centered a little bit. So it's starting to look better. We'll go ahead, we don't want it to be so squished, so we're going to add some padding. Padding will be 20 pixels. Save that, refresh. There we go, looking a little better there. Let's add a different background color. Let's go ahead and background color will be light gray. There we go. So now it's starting to look a little better, a little different. This is still kind of like a 90s style. I'm not the greatest artist when it comes to styling things. Different people have their strong suits, and this one's not mine. But you can see how you can use these tools to make things look much, much better. Even this looks much better than what it would look like without regular CSS. All right, so let's go ahead and add our class selector for our custom input. So come down here, and class is denoted by a dot instead of a pound sign. So let's go ahead and call this custom input. And we will go ahead and add a margin of 15 pixels to that. See what that does for us. Let's come back here. Refresh. There we go. Looks a little better there. And let's add a border radius of 5 pixels. We're going to make it curve a little bit. There we go. It's looking a little different. All right. So now the next thing we're going to talk about, when I hover over this, I want the color to change so that I can see that it's selected. So what I'm going to do is add something called a pseudo class. Now a pseudo class allows me to change the style of something based on what's going on. If you're hovering over it, if it's being blurred, or if it has the focus, something like that. So the pseudo class for this is going to be hover. So to add a pseudo class, you add your regular selector, then you add colon, and whatever it's going to be. You can see a list of pseudo classes right there, right? I'm going to use hover. So anytime I'm hovering over this, I want some stuff to change. So I want the background color to change to something. And I'm going to go ahead and use a hexadecimal color here so you can see that. So I want it to change there. So let's refresh this. Now when I hover over it, the background color changes to a lighter gray, and it just looks better. So that's really good, and I've got all my code up here in one spot. I only have to manage it once per page, or once on this page. Now if I click about, all my style's gone. So that's not good. So I need to go ahead and copy all this over and paste it in here just like I have it there. But now we're running into the same problem we had with the inline CSS, where the more pages you have, the more places you have to maintain that CSS. If the style changes in one place, you have to change it all over your website or your application. And that's just not, no one wants to do that. That's not fun. So we're going to take one step further to the ideal way to have your CSS, and that is in an external CSS file. So I'm going to go ahead and copy, actually I'm going to cut all of this CSS out, save that, and I'm going to create a new file. I'm going to call this styles.css. My CSS file, I'm going to go ahead and paste that all in there. Now if I come back here and refresh, I no longer have that. So this is what the page looks like without CSS. I need a way to tell my index.html to include that styles.css. And that is with a link tag. So in our link tag, we're going to have the relationship set to style sheet, and then our href will point at the relative path to our styles.css. I'll save that, come back, refresh, all my styles back. Now all I need to do is add this same line of code right here to my about.html. So in my head right there, refresh, and I can go back and forth, and I've got my style on both pages. So anytime I want to make changes to any pages using that style sheet, I can simply link to that style sheet, make all my changes in there, and have a unified style sheet throughout the application. So that is the gist of HTML and CSS. Obviously, we covered a lot, and there's a lot more that could be covered. As you practice and as you do new things, you'll find those, and you'll learn more and more about how to use HTML and CSS. These will be large components in the front-end development of any of your full-stack applications or any web pages that you may create. I'm going to go ahead and turn the time over now. Does anyone have any questions? You can either type in the chat or unmute yourself and ask the questions.
So I've been working on my own website just for the intro classes, and I'm using Adobe Dreamweaver just because I have the Adobe package, so it's easier to just use that. I have the CSS linked to the HTML, but I'm not seeing any style to my HTML file that comes from the CSS file, meaning that I had style to the HTML, but as soon as I started taking it and putting it in the CSS instead, it's no longer there.
Okay, so I would make. Do you have it linked into your HTML? And
Yes.
in the link, do you have the relationship or the rel style sheet?
Yes, sir.
And the next thing I would check is to see if the href, if the address is working there. For example, if I put something like this, I'm going to just say hello / that. So that's obviously not a real path right there.
Right.
And if I come in here, refresh it, I don't have my style. If I open my dev tools by going right-clicking, hitting inspect, I can look at the console. I can see that the file was not found right here. So if you're getting this in your console at all, that means the file is not found. You can go to the network, refresh again, and you can see that where it's trying to find that file at and see if that's right. But if you're getting, in your console, if you're getting this at all and it's saying you're not finding it, that means the path is not set up correctly.
Okay.
Are you getting this? Or are you, I don't know if you're checking right now as we're...
I'm checking right now. I'm not getting that. So it I guess because I have the ability to also see live, so I guess it's just not showing up on Dreamweaver the background. But when I'm trying to take the menu and turn it into a hover drop down with an icon. So that isn't quite working properly.
Okay. So what I would suggest, so you said you're using Dreamweaver just because you have access to it, right?
Yeah, I purchased the Adobe Cloud access, so they give me pretty much anything that's available through them.
Okay, very cool. I would look into, just for the purposes of this course, using either Visual Studio Code or Atom, because a lot of stuff will be done in there, and it's but you can use whatever you're comfortable with. So whatever you want to use, you're good.
I'll just make sure that I click the actual HTML file and see what it looks like online.
Yes, so I try that. If you still have issues with this, let's go ahead and set up a code review with one of your mentors. Are you taking the JavaScript or the .NET course?
I'm pretty sure it's the JavaScript.
JavaScript. Okay. Has your instructor or mentor reached out to you at all?
I've been talking to them, but I also had someone in my class that said I had a similar problem. Let me see if I can help you out, kind of a thing.
Okay,
So,
perfect. And yeah, working with other people in your class is also is really good. The steps that I would take are Google it and try to fix it if you can't. And this is for any problem. I'm just talking in general. Always Google
mhm,
it. See what you can find. If
right.
not, see if anyone else has had a similar problem or can help you. If not, then ask your mentor or instructor. And that is
Okay.
the path I would take. So if you can't figure that out, go ahead and set up a code review or a meeting with your mentor or instructor, and they will assist
Okay.
you with that. All right.
All right.
Shamika said, how do you work around finding the right color you want? You know what? I'm glad you asked that question because I'm not, like I said, I'm not an artist on that end. I'm not a designer. So a lot of times what I will do, awesome, there's a color picker. I use this a lot. Thank you, Elise.
Mhm.
So this can help you find the right color that you want. You can look around and
Color the shades. So,
yep, shades color choose, and when you change it, that will change the hexadecimal color, so you can get that. Something else that I just found that I like here is it's called coolers.co, but this will randomly generate a palette for you. So I forgot how to generate a palette. I just click that maybe. So see, there's a bunch of different themes. So if you're looking for a theme to use in your website or your application, and you don't know what to go with, go to this website or something similar, generate a few, and find the color theme you want. Like say I like this. This is the theme. It's kind of gray, kind of rainy. Let's choose. There we go. I'm gonna open a sorbet shop. These are the colors I want right here. Perfect. I have my hexadecimal colors. I can go ahead and copy those into my HTML and then use them. I find that helps out a lot, especially with the color themes. Good question. Any other questions? All right. Feel free to reach out if you have any questions. Make sure you're reaching out to your mentors and setting up code reviews. You should have a code review once a week. Those are very important. They help us gauge where you're at and get you the assistance you need, as well as you get the assistance you need so you can progress through the course and graduate, which is what we want everyone to do, and to help you out in any way we can. So thanks for attending. I'll see you guys next week, and have a good one.
thank you.